What's going on, everybody? So I promised you I'd tell the story. The story of what happened to me over the last decade is a startling example of a real-life X-Files tale. And I've had a hard time telling this story to people because I'm immediately cast into the group of people who are crazy. Fact of the matter is, I've been seeing stuff in the sky since I was a little kid. I've had very strange experiences in sleep and wake ever since I was a little boy. And I have a lot to say about the potential of extrasensory perception. But that aside, fact of the matter is something weird happened to my body over the last decade that the doctors can't figure out. And my real impetus for doing all of this, sharing this story with you, is because I want some answers. Some very strange things have happened. I'm going to start sharing them with you today. All right, so hang tight, buckle up. It's going to be one hell of a ride. So this story started back in 2013. I was in Italy. Every time I go to Italy, I get eaten alive by mosquitoes. I've been going there since I was a little kid. In the last couple of weeks that I was there, some strange stuff started appearing on my neck, the left-hand side of my neck. And we thought they might be bug bites. But I get back to the States, and my neck starts breaking out. And they look like, it looks like spots, But they're producing a material I'd never seen before. It wasn't pus, it wasn't anything like that. It was solid strips of material, chunks and strips of protein. Some sort of skin-like material, but the material was very strange. And the weirdest part about it is they didn't bleed. They oozed this weird gelatinous brown stuff. It was horrifying. It was painful. And because of it, I started going to the doctor. And then even weirder stuff started happening. Like a nerve in my jaw exploded inexplicably, and I almost went into septic shock. My friend Elizabeth Ballard will remember that one. She came and stayed with me. Nobody had any answers. And all the doctors could do was treat my pain. And this was when Purdue Pharma was really pushing pills to everyone, Opiates aren't addictive, they were saying, right? I had a big time career. I was working at Sapient Nitro at the time, and I really loved the work that I was doing. And then everything started falling apart, one thing at a time. And I kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And the body kept doing weirder and weirder things. And the doctors didn't have anything they could help me with. And by 2015, I was so horrified by the condition of my life that I came home to my mom's house. And I told them that I had an opiate dependency and that I needed to get some help. And at the time, I thought everything had centered around that I was just a drug addict. I was laying on the sofa at my mom's house, 2015, right before I'm going to go to Thailand to go to Hope, to rehabilitate myself. I'm laying on the sofa, I'm trying to kick. I'm like 4 days in, and I'm hella sick. Hella sick. And I remember laying on the sofa, and I could feel my heartbeat dropping, I could feel my breath wavering. And I said in my head, if there's anybody out there that can help me right now, please help me, I'm dying. And then all of a sudden, I heard a voice, and it goes, "Be calm, child. We can cure you. But first, we have to break you." And without hesitation, I said, "Then break me." And I've been telling this story ever since. And talked to the people that I went to rehab with. I told it at rehab. And even then, everybody looked at me like I was crazy. That's when everything really, really got weird. So in the next clip, I'm going to cover what happens 2015 through 2018. A little bit more of a ramp up. Clip after that, we're going to cover the last 3-4 years. I got some fun stuff to tell you guys. Stay tuned. I didn't want to come home to Chicago in 2015 after Thailand. I wanted to start my life completely anew. I didn't want to be in the same environment where, I was exposed to friends who were using drugs. I wanted new. And so I decided that leaving the country might be a good idea because I had 2 passports. Leaving the country would give me an opportunity to meet all new people and explore a career that had opportunities overseas. 2 passports made it possible. So I came back home to get everything in order so that I could leave. And when I got home, that same region on my neck over here that started breaking out in 2013 opened up like a book. And I'm not going to show you the scarring that I have just yet. I've got a whole presentation on what's happened to my body in detail. I'm going to offer it to the medical community for analysis. Because again, I'm looking for answers here. This is not just a storytelling expedition. I'm trying to figure out, I want facts to what happened to me. I have to care for myself for the rest of my life. So, opens up like a book. And again, the strangest materials start coming out. And I'll show some pictures of what I looked like back then. I was significantly heavier. And everybody thought that I had just started putting on weight because I was getting older or what have you. But 8 years after this all started, I can tell you that I've lost over 40 pounds. And that was without working out, without changing my diet, and basically laying around because I was half dead. Now, I am healthier than I've ever been. I'm running a 4-minute kilometer. And that's after what I estimate is almost 30 plus pounds of material had come out of me. You gotta ask yourself, probably, well, what is this material? How does 30 pounds of pimple come out of you? Well, that's the thing, it's not 30 pounds of pimple. It's 30 pounds of what appears to be, and what doctors have at this point verified is benign mutated cell growth, cysts, if you will, throughout my entire body, somehow mapping themselves only to my peripheral nervous system, and interestingly enough, potentially my central nervous system. I have a couple pictures of a couple things that have come out of my body that I'll weave into this story here. I have samples of these items as well. I have kept them in a sterile condition and they are frozen and ready for study. And there is some very strange material. So I'll start to describe a little of the material here because this material really started to make itself plainly evident after I got back from Thailand. What we're looking at here is a type of whitish yellowish protein. It comes out in strips and chunks, as I've described before, and one side is always crystallized. And in certain cases, these objects have what appear to be embedded materials in them. Small black or gray, potentially metal, potentially other types of material. Again, I haven't had this stuff analyzed to the extent that I want to, because in attempt in telling this story over the last 8 years, I have lost everything. But that did not start happening until I actually left the country. So when I got to London after Thailand in 2015, I was looking for a job. And I spent a couple weeks there with family, getting a feel for the city, figuring out where I wanted to live. And then my family went home. I had about a week, 10 days by myself before I went to go meet my father in Italy. And when I was there, I started feeling unwell. It was a couple days after my mom left. And normally when I feel unwell, I start doing something about it. Yoga helps me a lot. I suffer a lot of muscle tension, headaches, that kind of thing. And so I do yoga. I do yoga to make myself feel better. I also like dance and music. But it was the yoga that this time was doing something. And so I wasn't feeling well. It was actually, interestingly enough, it was the night before the Grenfell Grenfell Towers fire. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was a huge tragedy that happened in London. I was not too far away, actually in the same neighborhood, same borough. And it was the night before. I'm doing yoga. I've got a headache, not feeling well. I'm in an Airbnb, and I go into downward dog, and I put my forehead down on the floor of the carpet in the room that I was in. And as soon as I did that, my vision, my eyes were closed. My internal vision turned a bright blue. I'm talking like cobalt blue. So just for a second, try this with me. Close your eyes. Most of us see black, right? Maybe you get a little bit like ambient light shining through your eyelids, but it's definitely not bright blue. I'll never forget this. Bright blue. And then all of a sudden, in the same way that it happened when I was laying on the sofa before I went to Thailand, I hear a voice, and it always starts the same way. And they go, "Child, be calm. We will begin curing you now." Silence. And I open my eyes. I'm like, what just happened here? And then I can feel myself start to get nauseous, and the room start to spin. And I was like, oh man, I gotta lay down. I ended up falling asleep, waking up to this horrifying news of this fire and the smoke in the sky. When I got home from Italy a few weeks later, that region on my neck that had opened up in 2013, this thing opened up like a book. And it started dumping so much material that I began asking myself questions. What am I looking at? Is this superficial? Where is this material coming from? Why is it so painful? They always followed the same process. A spot on my body would get itchy. Then it would get really sore. And then eventually, something would start to appear on the surface of the skin. And then it would bust through the surface of the skin, and stuff would just continuously push its way out. I'd be lucky if every day I could clean out the material that was coming out of my body. I was racing to catch up with it when I got home. And so it delayed my exit back to Europe. I had come home because I needed to wrap up affairs, pack up, all that kind of stuff. I got stuck in the US. I didn't get to leave for 3 years. So from 2015 till 2018, my body went through an enormous transition. I lost almost 40 pounds. I'll show you a couple pictures. Hang on one sec. When I show people those pictures, the transition of what I look like over the last decade, most people don't believe it's me. Those are all me. They're not fakes at all. They're not Photoshop, nothing. I'm pretty horrified to show some of them, honestly. That's why I disappeared for the longest time. I was massively disfigured. I still am slightly. You can see some stuff on my face that still sticks out. That spot on my face that you're looking at right there, that's been there for over a year. So back in 2017, when the expulsion of all this material was sort of at its height, I started really taking a look at how the system was behaving. And I noticed a few things. One, it was perfectly symmetrical. If I had a spot on the left side of my body, I had a spot in exactly the same place on the right side of my body. Second, they seem to follow either my muscles or my nerves. They go up and down my neck, across my back, up and down my spinal cord, up and down my legs, my feet, and my hands. They appear like pimples, but they last an inordinate amount of time, and they don't produce liquid, they produce solids. And they don't have to be pushed to produce material. The material pushes itself out. I started looking through medical literature. I was like, what does this? Is the body actually capable of pushing material from the interstitial space inside your body, within the musculature, whatever? Is it possible to push it all the way out? Well, I started looking around. There's two sort of analogs I can draw here. One, the soldier who goes off to war and gets shrapnel in him, deep in the body from an explosion, what have you. A lot of the time that requires medical intervention to remove that material. Most of the time, from what I can tell, it does. Only in cases where it's relatively superficial will the body push it out. Normally what the body will do, if it's deep inside, it'll wrap it up into a little case and try and keep it from damaging the rest of the body. Sometimes that gets infected. Sometimes it needs to be medically removed. Other times, the person suffers because of its presence, but it doesn't really disrupt their life. In either case, the body's not pushing the material out on its own, especially if it's in the muscles. It doesn't have the natural behaviors to do such a thing. And I know that for a fact because if it did, we wouldn't have to deal with malignant cell growth within the body. If my body was in fact, the immune system was in fact targeting malignant cells, mutated cells in my body, and somehow finding a way to dispose of them by pushing them out of my body through my skin, I could not find another similar case. So when I carved a white mass the size of a grape from my right clavicle, I decided I was going to move home. I was in so much pain. And I started using again because I was in so much pain. The doctors wouldn't do anything about it. So after I carved that mass out of my right clavicle, I went home. And there, the process seemed to slow down. I started taking Epsom salt baths and really massaging the material out of my legs and my arms. And by mid-2018, I was in a place where I could say, all right, I think I can get started moving back to Europe. Let's give that a try. And by 2019, sure enough, I was on the road. 4 suitcases. 2 with clothing and 2 with art supplies. I was going to start my life anew. My body was a wreck. I had scars all over me and I was hella traumatized. But I was going to start anew. All I know, it always feels good, don't it? Alright, so, sorry, my back hurts. It's one of the things that I was left with. Bad back. So I get to England, it's May 2019. May 2019. I was so stoked to get there. Oh my. But sure enough, so like the body had been chill for a while. A good 6 months, the body had not really been producing anything. The soreness and the itchiness went away. And again, this is why I decided, yo, let's go. It's time. It's time to go start anew. And I had an idea. Wait, before I get into the medical stuff, let me tell you why I'm going to England. So ever since I was a kid, I've been drawing, I've been writing. And I was never able to put together my skills of engineering and storytelling and graphic design, artistry, what have you, and writing with the engineering. And so I had come up with a way to use my master's thesis, which was in computer vision. What I wanted to do was produce a series of artwork that was experiential, immersive. Things like portraits that react to the viewer, artwork that changes based on the person who's looking at it. So I was, going through all of that ideation, and I was very excited. I was very inspired. And I decided that London would be a great place because of the street art scene and the quality of the art that comes out of Europe in general. Just the history of it was fantastic. So I thought, well, let's go where Banksy went, right? And let's go check out the street vibes and let's see if we can produce something that's, hitting. It's got a message and I can bring all my skills back together and I'll start a life. I'll start a life doing something totally me. I was stoked. So May 2019, I get to London. I'm on the plane and all of a sudden I start getting this itch right here. First time I didn't think about it. Just itch, scratched it. All right. And then it started really buzzing and getting sore. And I was like, oh no. This is always the sign that something was gonna start bubbling out of my body. And sure enough, this spot right here, which if you look closely on me now, is so worn down from the amount of material that came out of it, started doing its thing. The first week that I was there, my body was clearly starting to make a move towards something. I'm thinking, maybe this is stress. Am I stressing my body? Is this a nervous system thing? Is there actually a physical consequence to stress? Is this the physical consequence to stress? I don't know. And so, looking through medical literature at night, trying to figure out what the body's doing. And sure enough, this thing is dumping. And the material that's coming out of here is different than the rest of the material. This material was like sand. It was totally dry. There would be no liquid that came out of it. You would rub the area and you would get all of these yellow and white particles, hard and relatively small. You could see them, but they were tiny, like, smaller than a grain of sand, for example. And you could see that the material was coming from my tear ducts. It was traveling up this way. I had little channels and it was traveling up and out. And it stayed open for a good 10 days before something in my head exploded. And that's no joke. So I've always had a hard time sleeping since I was a little boy. I have a very sort of nightmarish dream world. At the time I wasn't using opiates, so I was having an especially hard time sleeping. And I had been up for, a couple nights struggling to sleep. I think I'm like 2 or 3 nights in at this point. And I remember it was about midnight. I'm struggling to sleep. I take a little bit of extra cannabis oil to go to bed and I lay down. And the next thing I know, I wake up, I shoot out of bed, I shoot up. I hear this really loud ringing in my ears. It was so loud that I couldn't really think it was so loud. It was almost as if it wasn't a sound. It was almost like somebody was reaching into my brain. It was a sensation that I had never felt before, but a sensation that I have come to be more familiar with. And I have some very interesting things to say about that sensation. So I wake up, I shoot up, and I'm hearing this loud sound. And then all of a sudden, I feel something in the center of my head go pop. And I kind of did that. I stood still, and I'm thinking, am I having a stroke or something? What is this? What's going on here? And then all of a sudden, the backs of my eyes started throbbing real bad, and my ears started throbbing real bad, and I started getting vertigo. And I got really scared. I started to get up and I got really nauseous and I almost vomited off of the bed. I crawled down a flight of stairs to drag myself into the shower where I sat for another hour trying to get this sound out of my head. The next few weeks, my body started producing material again, but this time it wasn't from my neck here. It was from back here around the tendons. It was around this here. It was around my forehead. That's when my face and my jaw, I still have a spot down here, in fact. These have been here since 2019, producing material. The same type of material that was being produced as early as 2013. The same material that doctors, all they've told me is that it is benign cancer. All of the biopsies that I recently have only amounted to that. And at the time that this was going on, the only diagnosis they would give me is MRSA. Medically resistant Staphylococcus A is what I was told this symptomology is. And that's why I'm going public, because that does not match. And after multiple years of trying to get doctors to look at this, nobody's paying attention. But somehow I got better. And it's not by anybody that I interacted with personally, face to face. I got better from something in my head that calls me child, is blue, and is really wise. And when I get to London,